Hey everybody. Tonight I decided I'm going to go ahead and do both 32 and 33. They're both fairly short chapters and they kind of go together. So, uh, Lord willing and a little bit permits, I'm going to try to do both chapters tonight. So, I'd like to give a couple minutes for everybody to get on board. I'll be reading out of the King James with the ESV open for some more modern references if things get a little confusing, and then I'll have the Hebrew up. There's a lot of names tonight, so I'm going to be looking at those as we come to them. Hey Mark, Mom, Kimberly, cool. So we got a few people jumping on. That's good. A couple of things. Somebody was asking me the other night. Steve, I believe, was asking me the other night what all that clicking was in the background. It's my mouse as I click between tabs and stuff. So if you're wondering what that was, because I've got my computer set up here and I'm going through, you can see here, my setup here with all my whatever. But anyway, hey Ryan, welcome aboard. So hopefully everybody can hear me tonight. One of these days I'll get that webcam. What I'm looking for looks like it's going to be a little bit more pricey than what I have right now. So I'll continue to use the phone and continue to kind of do this angle thing until I'm ready to purchase something like that. Right now we're kind of holding back because of other things, other priorities. But all right, so let's get in. Hey Tom, welcome aboard. Glad you could make it. So we're going to start in Genesis chapter 32, and we'll start here in verse 1. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host," and he called the name of that place Mahanaim. So Mahanaim is the first place. It's translated as two camps. And later it becomes a Levitical city in Gad. I'm not saying that this place was, but the name is another city in the province of Gad. But anyway, Jacob's here and he sees a couple of angels from God. And these are the normal celestial angels, kind of like Gabriel is. This is not the theophany that we talk about so much. And he calls them God's host. Not that God's host is only two angels, but just that these are part of God's heavenly host. So he's introducing them, or I guess identifying them. I don't know if he's actually introducing them to anybody, but he's identifying them as celestial angels. He knows somehow that these are not just mere men. So verse 3, Jacob sent messengers before him. And it's interesting, if you look, I'll pull this up here real quick. The word for angels in verse 1 here is malak. But if you look in verse 3, the same word there, messengers, is malak. So just like in the Greek, the word for messengers is the same. And it's interesting that the King James translators took it upon themselves to not only not fully really translate this word, but they're going to the Greek to come back to the Hebrew here, because angel, the word angel, is kind of a loose transliteration of agalos, which is the Greek word for messenger, that we see translated as angel so often. But I would love to see a translation, like a modern English translation, that's as faithful as the King James tries to be, and some of the other, like the New American Standard and the ESV, try to be with the word for word. I prefer word for word, not the other kind of translation. I forgot what they call it, dynamic equivalence, which is basically commentary. The NIV is a dynamic equivalence, if you will. So I'd love to see a translation where it's a true translation. Like if we see the word Malach, we just see messenger, and then we determine from context what those words or what those people are that we're talking about. Oh, these are messengers of God, and when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." Well, we know then that these messengers from God are not prophets; they're actual what we refer to as angels, celestial angels. Hey, Linda. So. Anyway, having said that, Jacob sends messengers before him to Esau his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. So just to be kind of consistent, I looked up Seir. Seir means hairy or shaggy, which is really funny because the land is named essentially after Esau. Those two words both mean hairy. And so I thought that was kind of humorous to me. But Moses identifies this. Again, this is Moses writing to the Israelites, and we're starting to see this timeline catch up to where Moses is. Moses is writing, and so he says, this is the country of Edom. Remember, Esau is called Edom at this time, but Edomites is still at this time a forming nation. It's kind of a proto-nation. So, well, cherubim, Katie, is a particular kind of celestial being. They're not all what we would call angelic beings would be considered cherubim. It's an order of the heavenly messengers. So, but like I said, I want it to be a true translation, like a full true translation where we really use context. Yeah, cherubim and seraphim, exactly so. I want it to be a true translation of the words that we find in the original, not man's help. You know, we've seen what happens when man tries to help, and I think it's engendered a lot of misunderstanding because of man attempting to help. You see that, just to give a couple of brief examples, the word angel means messenger. That's one. So we kind of leave off, when we see the word angel, we kind of leave off trying to understand from the context what this means. Hey, Melba. And so a lot of people have failed to understand that the word messenger can apply to any kind of being. You can have human messengers like Jacob sending Malach to Esau, but he also meets Malach from God. And then on top of that, the Malach of God, the messenger of God, who identifies himself as God, is the theophany, is the pre-incarnate Jesus, the God the Son. And so there's confusion on that because we don't use the word Malach. I've heard it argued, well, Jesus can't be an angel because he's God the Son, and because I argue that Jesus is also a messenger from God, that somehow I'm arguing that he's also not God, which is the position that the Jehovah's Witnesses take. And I don't take that. I believe that Jesus is God, that he is God the Son, that he is definitely divinity, but I also believe that he is the angel of the Lord, as we read about from time to time, the theophany, the appearance of God, or the go-between between God the Father and man, and has always been. And later on, I even have an article up on my website that shows that he is easily the angel of the Lord, or the archangel Michael. But a lot of people read that and hear that, and they're like, oh. So, yeah. No, that's fine, Katie. I love questions. I love interaction. So, hey, John. Hey, Brian. Another one of those places of problem is more with the capitalization, where we got help from the translators, where they try to capitalize the word spirit. And so they capitalized the word spirit wherever they felt like it was needed to identify the Holy Spirit. But in so doing, they capitalized based on what they thought, not on divine inspiration, and not on the original language, because the original language doesn't have capitalization. The Greek language, the way that the Bible is written, is not written in capital letters. And so they just took it upon themselves to capitalize Spirit. So there's a whole lot of misunderstanding about who the Holy Spirit is, what the Holy Spirit is, when is the Bible talking about the Holy Spirit, and when is it talking about our spirit or just a general spirit of like a mindset kind of thing. And so when the translators try to help rather than just do their job of translating, problems happen. So anyway, just an interesting place to bring this up, because angels and messengers referring to two different kinds of beings, same word in the original language, is just right there, and I thought I'd bring that up. So all right, verse 4, and he commanded them, saying, Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now, and I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants, and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight. And the messengers return to Jacob. So they go and they do their thing, and then they come back and they return to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. You want me to do a talk on the Holy Spirit or Michael, Katie? On the Holy Spirit, okay. Yeah, that's actually a pretty big undertaking. I need to write several articles on that for my website too. But yeah, I could do that. I don't normally recommend commentary. Well, I'm not going to. I'm not going to break that tradition. I'd rather just, you can study it. But what I would say is, when you study the Holy Spirit, or when you just study the word Spirit in the New Testament especially, read it as if it's always not capitalized. Even if the word holy is in front of it, read it as if it's not capitalized, and try to understand it from the context. But yeah, I'll try to get one together. I think that's a big one. I know I'm gonna have a lot of people disagree with me on that, especially people who aren't members of the Church of Christ. They're gonna really not like what I have to say on that. So, but my main message here is going to continue with just going through the Bible verse by verse like this. So, hey Arthur, welcome aboard. All right. So anyway, the messengers return. They deliver Jacob's message, and they encountered Esau pretty quick, and said he's coming to meet you, and he's got 400 guys with him. And so Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and the camels, into two bands. So he's like, all right, we're going to divide everybody up into two groups. So if he attacks one, the other one can get away, which I think is pretty smart in a way. He's trying to, at least save some. But later on, we're going to see that he divides things up and he totally plays favorites. So I imagine he got some flack for that, or maybe they just kind of accepted it at this point. But anyway, he divided his assets up into two bands, and said, if Esau come to one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And so he does this, and then he appeals to God, rightly so. He's taking good steps here to prepare, but then he appeals to God. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac. And so again, remember, Jacob has got this little bit of distance between himself and God that Abraham and Isaac didn't have. He says, Jehovah, which said unto me. So he says, the God of my father Abraham, the God of my father Isaac, Jehovah, which said to me, return into thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. So he's making this appeal here. And I just wanted to check something I didn't even think to check. Yeah, okay. I am not worthy of all the least of all the mercies, and of all the truth which you have showed unto your servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. All right, so, hey, Robert. Hey, Stephen. So anyway, he says, God, you said, you're the one that said to return. So I'm doing what you said. And you have blessed me with all these blessings. You said that you were going to make my descendants as the sand of the sea. And I came across this river here with just my staff. Basically, I started off with nothing, and here I am having to divide into these two bands because they're so big. He's praying to God, asking God, please deliver me from my brother Esau, because the last time he talked to Esau hated him and was wanting to kill him, was looking to kill him. And so that's the prayer that he prays. And we're going to see here that the prayer is answered in the sense that Esau, 20 years have passed. Esau does not have the same hatred. Maybe he grew up a little bit or whatever, but definitely time cools things. That's kind of one of the things I need when I get angry. I need time. My wife's the same way. When I'm frustrated, whatever I'm angry at or frustrated with, I gotta take a step back. Facebook right now is just really, really getting on my nerves. And so every time I post anything serious, it's just, and so I mostly post up like things that'll make people laugh. I got an app on my phone that does dad jokes now. Post one of those up a day, and I love it because I'm a big fan of dad jokes. So, Kimberly, my website, you can go, it's all one word, swordmasterpublications.fandom.com. Fan, Fandom. And it was wiki, because I like the wiki style. It's self-referencing, which is great for what I'm doing with my articles. But they changed it to fandom because the original intention of the site was for people who were into like Marvel movies or Star Wars or whatever. They can post up a fan-made site with whatever information they wanted to post up on it and be self-referencing like a wiki is, like Wikipedia is. But I love that format. I actually, my author site for my novels is there as well. It's a fandom site as well, but it says fandom, and people are like, why are you doing it at a fandom site? Well, it changed its name, and so I didn't have any control over that. But it's that's where the site is, and there's almost 300 articles. I think at the last count was like 286, something like that. So anyway, so he lodged there that same night and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams. So he's taking a lot of females and some, I guess, breeding males, and 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. Okay. Anyway, so he delivers them into the hands of his servants. Every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space between drove and drove. So every type, like, so he's got goats, and then he's got the rams, and then he's got the camels with their kids, with their baby camels, and he's got basically donkeys, and then bulls, and then the female donkeys, and then he's got 10 like baby horses or whatever, and he's doing these things in waves. And what he's doing is he's sending these waves as a stalling tactic for his brother. It's like, oh, here comes a gift, and then here comes another gift, and then here comes another, there's all these things. So Jacob's pretty crafty. He's still that same crafty boy that we read about a few chapters earlier that ended up getting the birthright and the blessing. So he's not taking any chances here. So he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meets you, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou, and whither goest thou, and whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so he commanded the second and the third and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner you shall speak unto Esau when you find him. Hey, Rosalind, welcome. Milk camels, and milch is German for milk. Yeah. So, again, King James. But, yeah, thank you, Brian, for clearing that up. Hey, Carrie. He's feeding out Isaac with Esau, but yeah, he's definitely. I'm gonna give him a gift, and I'm gonna give him another gift, and I'm gonna see how this goes. Hey, Victor, welcome aboard. So it is pretty funny, and you just kind of have to laugh, and the relief that he feels later is you can imagine what he's feeling when Esau shows up with 400 guys. I don't know if Esau came with those 400 guys because he heard about this big mass of people and whatever coming in and felt that he was getting invaded, or if he just had 400 guys out doing patrol. Are these the Rohirrim just kind of out on patrol, happen to run across Legolas and Aragorn or whatever? But Jacob is obviously going to see it as Esau's coming out with 400 guys to kill everybody. So, hey, Abby, welcome aboard. And so Jacob is sending these waves of gifts, and then the saying that they have to say when they get there, and kind of to slow Esau down, and hopefully butter him up a little bit with all these gifts. So and then verse 20, and say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face, peradventure he will accept of me. So went the present before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford of Jabbok. Okay, so looked up Jabbok, and it just means an emptying, which probably coincidental, but we're going to see some events here that might be kind of fortuitous in the naming here, because Jacob kind of empties himself a bit and transforms himself. So, there it is, to definitely appease him. But anyway, I think it's just a coincidental name here. And so he takes his family and he sends them over the brook of Jabbok, and everything that he had. And Jacob is left alone on the near side of the river, and everything else is on the other side. And it doesn't say why he stayed, but it says that when he stayed, verse 24, there he wrestled a man with him until the break of day. So here we have just a man. Of course, most of us have heard this story. We know who this is. But it doesn't say angel. It doesn't say messenger. It's a man. Why is Jacob wrestling with this man? Initially, why would the fight start? Why would this wrestling match start? We aren't told. Moses doesn't tell us. Jacob was left alone, and then suddenly he's wrestling with this dude. How random is that? But we know that there's a purpose in this. So, again, a little bit of humor for me, at least, reading this. This whole chapter has got a little bit of a, maybe after the tension of the last chapter, you have a little bit of kind of humor here. But anyway, verse 25, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. So here's the interesting thing here. The first he in this passage is the man that Jacob is wrestling with. And when this man sees that he is not prevailing against Jacob, he touches the hollow of his thigh. It's kind of that place right alongside the butt cheek, above the main part of the thigh where the hip is, and he puts Jacob's hip joint out, comes out of socket a little bit as he wrestled with him, and I don't really know what to make of that. Obviously, we know that this is the theophany now. This is God the Son here wrestling with Jacob, and he's not prevailing against him. it has to be that he's letting him win, letting Jacob win just to kind of wrestle with him all night. And then he puts the hip out of joint. And, I can't, there's nothing here in the text that tells us anything about this. It just says strained. Okay. Well, it talks about them not eating the sinew. I was looking at the ESV here, verse 25, touched his hip socket and the hip was out of joint as he wrestled him. So that's what I see in the ESV, which is what I went to kind of really figure out what the King James was saying. But it does say the thigh was out of joint, which didn't make sense to me because the thigh isn't a joint. The thigh is that long top part of the leg, and it's like, what does this mean? Oh, it's the hip. But anyway, it's just kind of funny that here you have God the Son has come down and he's wrestling with Jacob, and he essentially knocks his hip out of joint or strains it or whatever he does, and then Jacob still doesn't let go, and so this man says, "Let me go, for the day breaks." And Jacob doesn't. He says, "I will not let you go except you bless me." And I think by this time, Jacob recognizes who this is. And the man says unto him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel." All right. So the word Israel means to prevail in wrestling. But really, just the short version of it is one who wrestles with God. And so there's this literal idea that Jacob has wrestled with God and is, hey, sweetheart, welcome aboard. And so he gets named to Israel for wrestling with God. But there's this very long kind of look at these people that are called Israelites, because by being called Israelites, they are those who wrestle with God. And that's literally the history of the Israelite nation, is from, even at the time that they are slaves, they're complaining and whining to Moses. You have them having to endure some of the plagues, and some of the later ones they don't. But when they come out, it doesn't take them long to start whining. And they whine all through the 40 years. They whine all the time through the judges, and then they end up whining to get Saul, and it's just this constant back and forth with God, instead of just accepting that he's going to take care of them and trusting him. So, and I think we see a little bit of that here in Jacob. So, no, I'm pretty sure he's limping afterwards. I'm pretty sure there isn't any kind of a prevention here. So anyway, so he changes his name. Remember, the man hasn't officially identified himself yet. Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. So who has the authority to change somebody's name like that, right? For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. So he's a prince. He's got this kind of city state that's roving with him now. He's a descendant of Abraham, a descendant of Isaac. So there's this lordship that he has here, and because of that, he has prevailed here. And there's this idea of prevailing or wrestling with God. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. So this idea of Peniel just means to face God. And as he passed over Penuel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. He limped, is what that means. And so by this time, Jacob has realized who he is wrestling with. He realizes that this is God, the God that came and spoke to my grandfather Abraham, the God that spoke to Isaac. This is a personal encounter that he is finally having. And when he finally has this personal encounter, instead of this dream type of conversation that he's normally used to, it's a fight that Jacob has. And there's just this so much foreshadowing or typifying here that we see in the way that Jacob has this relationship with God. So anyway, so he sun rises and he's limping along across the water here. Therefore the children of Israel do not eat the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh and the sinew that shrank. So the sinew that shrinks is right there at the hip, and that's what dislocated his hip. And so they don't eat that out of animals today. And talking about Moses, when Moses, right, even up to that point, these descendants have this habit. So that's 32, and we're going to move into 33, which is a really short chapter where Jacob and Esau actually get to come together. Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. He divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the two handmaidens. So he's like, all right, you take the children that came from you. And that's how he divided up the children. And he put the handmaids and their children foremost, so they go first. So the handmaidens of Leah and Rachel go first with their children, and then Leah, and then Rachel, and Joseph at the very back. And remember, he's still afraid of Esau. And so he's basically creating this last little buffer here with by playing favorites. And he holds Rachel and Joseph at the very back next to him, and then Leah's right in front of that, and then the handmaids in front of that with their children. And man, I wonder if he got an earful for that choice. So anyway, and he passed over before them. Okay, so here's the interesting thing. After lining them up, Jacob goes in front of all of them and bows himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So he bows, moves a little forward, bows, moves a little forward, does it 7 times. And Esau runs to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And I can't help but draw a parallel here. Not that the Bible makes one here, but just in my mind, I'm seeing the same scene, except with the father and the prodigal son, where the son goes away for a time, and then when he comes back, remember when the son left, the prodigal son leaves. He leaves under pretty immature, selfish circumstances. And then when he comes back, the father has been standing there looking for him every day, and he sees him and he runs out and he falls on, the son is expecting a cool reception. Yeah, I know, right, Mom? That's crazy. He wrestles with God all night long, but he's still afraid of his brother. So that's a great point. And like I said, there's a little bit of humor here, but the prodigal son is expecting not great reception when he comes back. He's like, look, I've squandered everything. I know I've been a loser, and maybe my father will hire me as a servant. And so when he comes back, the father is so happy to see him that he embraces him. He's kissing his neck. He's just so happy to see him. When he comes back, and here Esau is acting exactly the same way. Remember, he was so hot-headed, so high-tempered, that he was ready to kill Jacob. And so Jacob goes away for 20 years. And here we see a much more mature Esau, loving that his brother has come back, embracing him, and they are crying. They're so... Oh, there was Dad who said that. Yeah. Good observation, Dad. But they're falling on his neck and kissing him, and they wept, and they're just crying. They're so happy that all the tension has gone out. There's no tension. And so Esau lifts up his eyes and he sees the women and the children, and he said, "Who are these with you?" And he said, "These are the children which God has graciously given thy servant." So he's thanking God. He's giving God the honor here. Then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, "What meanest thou by all this drove which I met?" In other words, what were these animals you were sending to me in waves? And he said, "These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord." Jacob saying that, I wanted you to be happy. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that you have unto yourselves. So Esau's like, no. I don't need any of this. I got plenty of my own. You keep it. And Jacob's like, no, I pray. If I have found grace in your sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. So he's telling Esau, look, I've seen your face as I just got finished seeing God face to face. Remember, he Peniel in the last chapter there. He was expecting to have this fight with Esau, but he ends up having this fight with God instead. And so there's this kind of play back and forth that's going on. And he's like, look, if I have found favor in your sight, if I truly am being received the way that you are saying that I'm being received here, then just keep my gift. I've got plenty. God has blessed me. So he says, take, I pray, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me. That word grace there just means favor. And I want to talk about grace a lot, especially to those who are not of the same faith, because I think there's a huge misunderstanding of what grace is. But the word itself just means favor. So dealing graciously or dealing favorably is what God has done here to Jacob. Because I have enough, he urged him, and Esau takes it. Okay, so but I'll save the grace talk for another night. Maybe when I've done Genesis, I'll take a break and do some of these requested lessons. So yes, some good points here. The brotherly interaction, I think, goes against the erroneous idea that God hated or loved the individuals, Esau and Jacob. The relationship between these two boys shows that both of them had moments of fault and praise toward each other, not that Jacob was good and Esau was bad. Yeah, that's a great point. And another point just like that, Stephen, is that here you see Jacob calling himself the servant of Esau. The man Jacob is calling himself the servant of Esau. And we see throughout the lives of these two men, that is how the interaction happens. It's little brother to big brother. Remember, they're twins, but it's kind of this little brother to big brother kind of interaction that they have. That Jacob is always, he's serving him meals. He's taking care of him. Here he's giving him gifts. He's afraid that his big brother, born a few minutes before him, are interacting with him in a way that Jacob is clearly acting subservient to Esau, kind of like the dog crouches down and looks up, trying not to get the big dog to hurt him. But it was prophesied that Esau would serve Jacob. And so over and over again, it's reinforced that we're not talking about the individuals, we're talking about the nations. The predestination of Romans 9 is about the nations. It's not about the individuals. So it's really important to kind of drive that point home, because so many people get it wrong. When they talk about predestination of individuals, they like to go to Romans 9, and they don't have any context to support that position. So anyway, great point, Stephen. Thank you. So verse 12, and he said, let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before you. And he said unto him, my Lord knows that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds with young are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Basically, Jacob's saying, I can't keep up with you. I got little kids. I've got animals that have younglings with them. There's no way I could keep up with what's basically a scouting army here of 400 men. If I try to keep up with you, then bad things are going to happen. So you go on ahead, is what he tells him. So, well, Abby, that's what I'm saying is, if you look at the way that the individuals are presented, the way that Romans 9 talks about it, the way that earlier in Genesis talked about, I forget what chapter it was, but when the individuals are talked about, every description of the two individuals is Jacob is subservient to Esau, or Jacob is kind of the weaker or the lesser, or I don't know best way to put it. But he's kind of always got this fear of Esau, or this kind of servant's idea of Esau. He calls himself, let thy servant, talking about himself to Esau, please you, and on all this. So the way that Jacob is talked about as a man, he is always the servant of Esau, at least in attitude. But there's a flip flop. Esau, as a nation, the Edomites are always, hey Julian, the Edomites become the servants of the Israelite nation for a long time, until what Abraham says is that eventually that Edom is going to get tired of that yoke and throw it off, which they do eventually do. Well, Abraham's not talking about Esau. That never happens to Esau the man. So what is Stephen saying here? Yeah, Malachi does a good job of kind of explaining that this is about the nations and stuff. So you can't have it be about the individuals at all, because none of what Isaac said about Edom or Esau as a man, or I'm sorry, none of what Isaac said about Edom as the nation applied to Esau the man. It just doesn't apply to him. There's nothing that we read ever where Esau, the man, was a servant of Jacob. It's not presented that way. It's not hinted at. There's nothing in the Bible that ever shows us that Esau the man, while he was alive, ever served Jacob. And so in this sense, and we don't even have here too much that there's hatred of God towards Esau. That's what Stephen's point was, is that Esau is kind of still in the land of Isaac. He's around. His father's still alive even. And Esau is not talked about as a hated man. But what Stephen brings up here in Malachi is the Edomite nation, because they become wicked. Well, so what were they predestined for? So Esau and Jacob were predestined in terms of what the nations would become by what Isaac told Jacob and Esau. And remember, Isaac is speaking as the patriarch prophet of God. And so what he's saying about those two nations, about what would come from his sons, that prophecy, or that predestination, if you will, is applicable only to the nations. So God never predestined Esau individually as anything. He never predestined Jacob individually as anything. The men were not predestined as anything, but the nations were predestined. And that's the point that I have always made, Abby, with you and Julian and Solomon, and anybody that believes in personal or individual predestination, is the Bible, when it talks about predestination, especially in terms of salvation, never talks about individuals. It only talks about groups of people. And so this is Esau and Jacob, because they're in Romans 9, are a good foil for talking about predestination, because it is absolutely evident that Jacob and Esau as individual men do not fit what they were predestined to be by Isaac's prophecy and by what Romans 9 talks about. They just don't fit it. There's no description. There's no way to talk about them as predestined to be what they're described to be by Isaac's prophecy as men. But it is absolutely the case that that's what happens to the nations, because the Edomites become wicked. And God eventually despises them as a nation and deals with them as a nation. And we see throughout the prophecies that that's exactly what happens. So it's just a great case of where predestination is about groups of people. And that's why I say that the church as a group, as an overall group, is predestined to salvation. But we as free-willed beings make that choice to obey the gospel and become part of that organization that is the body of the saved. And so that's kind of touching on some of the conversations that we've had in the past there. So 18,000 Syrians, selling also garrison in Edom. Throughout all Edom he put garrisons, and all the Edomites became David's servants. So yeah, that's the point. 2 Samuel 8 is where the descendants of Esau become the servants of Israel, when David kind of puts all these garrisons everywhere and stuff. So Esau served David, or the Edomites served Israel at that point, and for a long time thereafter. So all right, let's finish this up, and then if there's more questions, I'll answer those. More conversation, I'm happy to deal with that. But if not, if you leave comments or questions, I will come to those after the video is over, shortly. So anyway, they were worried about the young. So verse 14, let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant. See, there it is, Jacob serving Esau. And I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goes before me, and the children be able to endure. And I'm going to come at whatever pace I can handle until I come to you in Seir. And Esau said, let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. So I'm going to give you some guys that are part of my 400 to stay with you and help out. And he said, what do you need? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth. So that word Succoth is booths. And it's interesting here because this is the place not only that Jacob stops and builds some things here, but this is the place that the Israelites stop first when they come out of the land of Egypt. So that we're fairly close to where the Israelites are first coming out of Egypt at this point in the story. So anyway, the place is called Booths because, verse 17, he built a house there, and he made booths, or what we would call barns, for his cattle. Therefore, the name of the place is called Succoth. And Jacob came to, so he dwells there for just a little bit. He doesn't, it's not that he spends a lot of time there, but he does kind of hang out with his brother for a little bit, and long enough to where he builds some barns, probably long enough, thus the Feast of Booths, because that's where they stopped. And probably he stays there long enough for the baby cows and whatever to grow up, so probably just for a season or so. Because then he goes on to Salem, which is a city of Shechem. Well, Salem is what becomes Jerusalem. Salem just means peace. So where we hear the people who speak Hebrew today, or the people who are kind of wannabe Israelites, there's a lot of people who are still stuck on following the Old Testament, even though it's not an authority anymore, and they insist on speaking Hebrew for some reason. They say shalom when they greet you, and that just shalom or Salem just means peace. So Jacob came to Shalem or Salem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, and he came from Padan Aram and pitched his tent before the city. Remember, Salem is the same place where Melchizedek is the king priest when Abraham is there. No longer, we don't hear anything more about Melchizedek at this point. So when he comes from Padan Aram and pitched his tent before the city, and he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar and called it El Elohi Israel, which the mighty God of Israel, El Elohi Israel. And so that's what that means. And that's the altar that he creates there. So, Kevin, you are just joining us here at the end, so you'll have to watch from the beginning once I get it posted up. Also, I haven't got any of the latest videos up on YouTube since my last kind of wave. I got to working on novels and stuff today. So, anyway, see, Jacob did not live in the city because it was devoted to pagan gods. He lived outside of the city in a tent. Yeah, he purchased some land outside of the city. That's right, Mom. He doesn't go there, and we're going to see that Jacob spends some time, but you're going to see that he ends up going into Egypt eventually with Joseph and stuff. So we're getting to that point. But anyway, that's all I got. Unless there's any questions here, I'll leave a couple of minutes for questions if anybody wants to ask. I do have to send my little one down to take a shower. So if you have a question, post it up. I'll leave this running for just a couple more minutes, and then I'll address those if those come up. But give me a second. You need to save and quit.
Just when I'm done with the
Hey,
doors.
save and quit. Save and quit. Did you quit the game? Because I'm going to close the laptop. 5.
Try.
Save and quit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, go take a shower. Okay, it's time to go. All right, I'll do it. Here, look, I'll help you.
I'm trying to sit.
No, it's time to go. Hit save and quit. Go take a shower. You can do more tomorrow. It's Minecraft. It's not like it's not going to be there.
I didn't see the video.
Okay. Mom says it's time to go take a shower. Okay? Go on. Go take a shower. If you want to play Minecraft tomorrow, you need to go take a shower. 5, 4, 3. I love you. Sweet dreams. All right. Any questions? If I have a question, comes out as a question, please email or text me your website link. I missed it. Yeah, Kimberly, I'll get that to you. So, is Yoda falling down? Yoda's not. Oh yeah, Yoda is falling down. Oh, he came out of the pen. When I pin my posters up, you're welcome, Kimberly. When I pin my posters up, I don't put holes through them. I kind of pin it to the side a little bit, so I guess it came out. So thank you. But yeah, Kimberly, I'll definitely get you that website here in just a second when I shut anything or shut this down. So I guess there's no other questions, but please feel free to private message me or post up questions you have in the video comments after this is posted up, and I will get to them as I can. Thank y'all for joining me, and y'all have a wonderful evening.